You're happiest when you're single. You still want to be in relationship, but not at the expense of the stability, peace, and quite frankly, your sanity that you have worked so hard to create for yourself in your life. Attachment theory explains how you bond with a man, but this video is going to explain how you lose yourself inside that bond and the reason why relationships just end up feeling so exhausting, make you feel like you're too much, you're oversensitive, and like you're losing yourself, like you're losing the essence of who you really are. And it isn't because you don't know how to create connection with someone, right? It's because you struggle with what happens to you inside that connection. You see, when you first start dating a man, you feel magnetic, energized, happy and playful. There's an energy on the date where you feel powerful and flirty, cool and seductive. But as that relationship progresses, slowly, bit by bit, that energy starts to feel sapped. Your sense of humor starts to feel completely flatlined and muted. You lose appreciation for this once amazing man you were so excited to date. Your spark feels dimmed, but you don't even know when that even started happening. And instead of feeling like your cool, confident, easygoing self, you now feel irritable, critical towards the man, right? You feel easily triggered. You go from feeling like your best single self to feeling like the version of you that even you don't like anymore. And you notice the difference. And that personality shift is not you being wrong or bad. It's actually a signal that something in the relationship dynamic is causing you to feel this way. And guess what, babe? Your feelings are totally valid because in this case, your feelings are not the thing that is wrong. Here's the thing. Early dating dynamics determine the relationship dynamics later on. And a relational dynamic gets set up very early in dating, like in the first few weeks. And that dynamic is either set up for you to thrive or for you to slowly start feeling completely depleted. You might find yourself to be focused on keeping the connection going, which is survival, right? But what about actually thriving in connection? Yes, you heard that right. What if your life actually starts to improve by being in relationship with a man? Because you're right. Why else would you actually want to be in a relationship if it doesn't add to your life, including your mental health? So if you haven't guessed it already, this video series is all about that phenomenon of losing yourself in relationship. Have you been there? Let me know in the comments if you have below. 100% boundaries, of course, play a role, but there's a deeper reason why you don't set the boundary in the first place. And that's what this whole video series is about. So don't forget to subscribe. So in this video, I'm going to explain why you just end up feeling like you eventually lose yourself in new romantic relationships. And I'm going to show you exactly where this dynamic begins and how to stop it completely. Because when you set the dynamic up differently from the very beginning of dating someone new, you not only build the foundations of a relationship that feels effortless, but you do two additional things. You build a persona of value in your date's eyes, and you maintain attraction polarity. But it's not just a question of boundaries, because let's face it, you already know where you might be slipping up with that, right? Okay, so let's go deeper. You're not bad at relationships. You were trained into a relational role of being the overgiver. That is, you were trained somewhere along the line, right? Probably in your childhood, to prioritize others above yourself. And this is why you don't set the boundary in the first place. Sometimes we refer to this as being the accommodator, the fixer, the responsible one. You'll know immediately if this is you, right? And if you're in my community, you'll know I always refer to you ladies as golden-hearted women. You are honestly just such good people. You care about doing the right thing and about being your best self. You're conscientious of how your actions make others feel. You were raised that way, right? So when you get things wrong, you look at your behavior and you ask yourself, what could I have done better in that situation? because you already know you can't control other people, but you can control yourself. And that is such, honestly, it is such a beautiful quality that you have. You should be super proud of that. But in dating, and what I'm specifically talking about here is in early dating, taking more responsibility than is truly yours to take for the relationship can actually turn against you. You see, you were raised to be a good, decent person who cares for others. But the one thing you do wrong, you mistake overgiving for love. And in early connection, you mistake it for kindness or being a good person. And you do this from quite early on in the dating process. And that confusion is completely destroying your relationship dynamic before you even get started. So let's unpack that bit a little bit. The best way to do this is to basically just give you examples, and you can basically use this to see, okay, is this a checklist? Like, do I do these things? Because let's chat about what behaviors in early dating and relationship actually look like when you're putting someone else's needs above your own, right? Let's start with the most obvious and then get to the much more nuanced ones, right? Feeling guilty to date more than one man because one man has already expressed his feelings for you, right? Or his behavior is showing a lot of interest. You are interested and curious to get to know him, but maybe his feelings feel a little bit stronger than yours to begin with. And you're still open to dating other men, but you kind of feel like, oh, okay, he's already expressed how amazing I am. So if I date other men, it's just going to feel like cheating, right? We're going to get into this so much more in video 2, so make sure you're subscribed, okay? Here's the next behavior. Agreeing to his date plans, even though you know you're not going to have a good time. Girl, you have been to that crazy golf thing 15 times. You know the course off by heart. You hate abseiling. And you also really don't like seafood. But you're kind of just going along with it because you're not really that attached. You're not really that invested, right? But it's important to actually start practicing taking up space in the relationship from the very beginning, even if you don't really care. In fact, why not practice doing that when you're not yet attached? Do you get what I mean? Because I know you're easygoing and you don't really care, but there will come a time when you do care about things and you haven't set the dynamic for it to be receptive to you taking up the space and having your preference. Okay, another one, not questioning some of his opinions or the things he says in early dating. Again, because you're not really that invested yet, right? And you don't want to create conflict. You are data gathering, which is amazing. You're being objective. You're noticing that some of his opinions are a bit crazy or a bit intense, but you're not saying anything because you don't really care. He's cute. You want to go on a second date, but right now this doesn't just feel like, it just doesn't feel worth bringing it up. That kind of conflict avoidance or awkward, it's not even conflict, it's awkwardness avoidance, doesn't set the dynamic for things to be in the gray area later on. Let's go through another one. Adapting to his communication style instead of stating yours. Okay, he texts once a day, but you suppress wanting more. He sends long paragraphs or voice notes. You reply equally, even when you're drained and you have such a long day. You don't want him to feel like he's not being valued or appreciated. He calls unexpectedly and you answer it even when it completely disrupts your routine and your day. And again, you appreciate flexibility is required for a relationship, right? But equally, it's just another way of maybe you have important things to do during that day, right? But you're just putting it second because you're like, well, flexibility is needed in relationship. Your needs have gone second. On the date, this is a huge one that you all tell me you do this, right? And I used to do this too. On the date, you fill in the silences when he doesn't ask questions. Because we all know how awkward it is when you're literally just sitting there and like, so. But actually, there's so much golden information in those silences in the date. Practice leaning back and not filling them in and see what the man can do. Maybe you soften your personality to be more digestible, right? Your friends tell you you're really intense, so you don't want to come across as super intense on the first date. You're going to save that for 2 months down the line, and guess what? By that point, that's probably going to be one of his red flags, or he's just going to be like, wow, you were so different when we started dating, and it's already setting up the relationship to fail. Maybe you give him the benefit of the doubt instead of actually data gathering, right? So you're like, okay, like you might rationalize his behavior to kind of preserve his image in your eyes rather than actually just being the neutral observer and safeguarding your emotions and best interests first, right? You might not ask follow-up questions when something feels off. Maybe you feel a flicker of confusion, but you kind of just let it go. For example, he changes plans last minute and you say, no worries. You know that you're easy with it now, but in a month or two, if you guys are still dating, that's going to annoy you. He avoids the question, you don't circle back and ask him again because you're like, oh, again, how important was that question? He jokes in a way that doesn't land, you laugh anyway. You're like, I'm just going to be like, I just want to keep this easy breezy. You override your own curiosity to keep flow, right? Maybe you even treat ambiguity as something you need to emotionally manage instead of saying, I'm actually not sure what we're doing or where this connection is going. Can we clarify? You sit with the uncertainty and you think that you have to emotionally regulate yourself alone so you don't pressure him. Your concern of pressuring him goes above the feeling of uncertainty you feel and the discomfort that makes you feel like, where am I investing my time in this? Do you confuse emotional suppression with emotional maturity? Do you mistake being calm as being evolved? So you don't say, you know what, that actually just didn't feel good. I felt dismissed. That felt confusing to me. You stay composed while your needs just go completely unmet. This next one is a huge one that I see, right? And this is actually quite nuanced now. Can you see how we're moving away from the super obvious ones? And we're now getting into like quite nuanced things that you probably don't even realize you're doing. Here's a huge one. Do you confuse reliability for desirability, right? And I call this the overcorrection. You know what your attachment pattern is, right? You've done the work, you've watched the YouTube videos, maybe you've even had a therapist or a coach, right? And you don't want to show up as emotionally dysregulated in dating. You don't want to be anxiously attached and lean in too much. You don't want to chase him. You know better than that now. You also don't want to be avoidant and lean away from intimacy just because maybe his pace is a little bit too quick for you. So you accidentally overcorrect and go from what used to be being in your past emotional chaos to actually over availability. Because there is such a thing, right? Like when you're in your attachment pattern, whatever it is, you're on this side of the spectrum. But when you actually overcorrect that and you almost become over reliable or like over regulated or like what you think in your head a stable person is, you actually overcorrect and you're on the way other side of the spectrum, right? And you're not actually doing things in alignment with how you feel. You're doing things in alignment with your head. You're like, well, I think stable people reply on the regular. They don't always like take ages to reply to a text message. They don't overcompose themselves. So you almost second guess what that's like. And this, I totally get why you do that because you've never been stable before. I was never stable. And I used to do this, right? Let me explain this so you really get it. Attraction actually thrives on polarity. It's a dance, right? I could go into that so much more, but that's going off topic, right? But what I want you to get from this particular video is it's not over availability. Secure behavior is not saying yes to everything and like replying like an automated robot in the sense of it's not an automated email response, right? He replies and then you reply. Like it's okay to take your time with things and to check in with how you feel. Secure behavior does include boundaries, right? So it's about responding from self-connection. How does this feel? Do I have time to respond now? Is this going too fast? Is it actually going too slow? Instead of the fear of losing him by being too much or by actually like not giving enough. Because otherwise, what you actually become is the patient mother archetype. The only person who's going to be so unconditional with their behavior is his mum, right? That's not what you're not trying to take that role, right? You're trying to be you already are. When you check in with yourself and you behave in accordance with what feels good to you, you already are the sexy, confident woman archetype, right? So you don't need to overcorrect. And that's effectively why men love bitches. Have you ever heard that phrase before? Here are a couple more. Letting physical attraction and affection increase faster than emotional safety. Girl, no. Emotional safety, and I cannot say this enough, okay? And I know I sound really old-fashioned when I say this stuff, okay? But it's the truth and it works. Emotional safety needs to build first. Otherwise, what are you actually doing and who are you doing it with, right? Are you actually afraid to say no on subconscious level for fear of losing his interest? Do you think that if you actually pace it out in a way that gets your needs met first? So all women need emotional availability in relationship, especially if you're looking for a lifetime partner. Because remember, all of my work is about helping you get the lifetime partner. It's not about helping you get a man for 3 months. You don't need help with that, right? So when you actually get your needs met first in the relationship, which are emotional needs, it doesn't mean that he's not also experiencing a lot of joy and pleasure by connecting with you. It just means that you're creating a cocoon of safety first before you start over investing in a way that's going to make it super difficult for you to walk away if something doesn't feel right later down the lines. And we're going to talk about this in so much detail. It's going to be story time in video 3, where we talk about my client Shelley and how she really learned this the hard way and how she corrected it and got herself into an amazing relationship, right? So do you allow other physical bonding behaviors to occur before you truly feel secure? It doesn't always have to be something, it doesn't have to always be physical intimacy. It can sometimes just be a little bit of cuddling or, kissing, or it can be something small that just, it makes you really attached before you even know the person inside. Who are you actually getting attached to? Do you feel responsible? Okay, this is a different one. Do you feel responsible for the relationship momentum? I used to feel this one a lot, and I definitely know my clients do as well, right? You might feel pressure to actually keep the connection alive. So you send follow-up text messages, checking in with him, like, how are you doing? How's your week been? Because you just haven't heard from him. You suggest the next plan. You're trying to lock down the second date by the end of the first date. You're not really allowing him to do his thing, because what you're doing in dating is you're observing. You're the neutral observer. You're watching. What is normal for this guy? And we don't have to demonize the men we date, right? We're not saying, are they a good person or a bad person? We're saying, what is his normal? And does his normal fit with mine? Because it might not, right? So maybe you suggest the next plan because you don't want the momentum to drop. You keep the conversation flowing, right? All of these behaviors that I've just gone through, they don't feel like self-betrayal or putting someone else's needs first. They actually feel like being a kind person. They feel like being flexible. They feel like being mature, not overreacting. But collectively, these behaviors are saying to you, my internal experience is secondary to the other person and relational harmony, right? So basically you're putting the relationship, the thing that's happening between you and the man or the man ahead of what your internal and external experience really is. Does it align with you? And when early dating turns into relationship, these very small, can you see how some of these behaviors are so small sometimes, right? They're kind of routines and patterns you're just used to doing in connection. And these small overgiving behaviors can actually extrapolate into a whole relationship dynamic, which I'm also going to give examples of. So let me know in the comments if you're relating to any of this, right? Or let me know other small things that it's kind of just like penny dropped for you. You're like, oh my God, I might not do that, but this is what I do, right? Because those small overgiving behaviors in early relationship extrapolate into other behaviors, such as apologizing first, even when it's not your fault, because it's a little bit like you want to maintain the stability of that connection and that relationship, right? The feeling of conflict or the silence before he responds, right? Before he kind of checks in with himself and responds, actually might feel worse to you than apologizing for something you didn't even do. You might have just expressed an emotion, right? Overcompensating for an argument by being nice or being sweet afterwards, right? So many times when there hasn't been space in our other connections from our childhood, in our friendships, where we haven't been able to have the space to have your feelings and for those feelings to be valid, because the other person can't hold the space for it, they can't handle it. So it either just ends in that relationship breaking, or there being a huge uncomfortable stalemate where you then end up coming back together again, but nothing actually gets resolved. And in that whole process, you're so emotionally drained and exhausted that you just apologize to keep the peace, because your nervous system just can't handle the emotional ambiguity, or you're accidentally rescuing because you don't want the connection to end. So you're like, well, okay, maybe it just means that my emotions don't get to take up space, because in order for this connection to last, I just have to be less. And you don't obviously say those words. You would never say those words to yourself, because you know that you shouldn't be saying things like that. You know that you know what the shoulds are, but it's about what feels appropriate for you, right? It doesn't feel safe for you to take up space in the relationship. So you apologize prematurely, right? So all of these things can be how these very small, very, very small dating dynamics in the very beginning start to almost set precedent for who you get to be in the relationship later on. If you don't state a preference early on in dating, how can you know that there's going to be space for you later down in the relationship? Maybe you make excuses for his bad behavior. Oh, this is something I used to do all the time, right? And maybe you even help him to interpret things in the best possible light, so he doesn't look or feel bad. You don't have the awkwardness of actually being like, actually, I think you need to take accountability for that. Maybe he's shared something with you that's happened at work, and you're like, I love you so much, but I kind of get it from your work colleague's perspective. I kind of get, yeah, like, do you think this, you if this was your friend who you have this amazing connection with, you would say, oh, I so see it from your perspective, but do you think maybe ABC could have been done better on your part? Because like sometimes, you would objectively explain these things, but you don't with this guy that you're dating, and you don't with this guy in early relationship, because on some level he can't handle that criticism. He's going to view it as criticism and overreact, right? You help him to not take accountability. That's a subtle behavior that comes up in relationship, right? Maybe you feel the need to smooth things out after every little tense moment, right? Because you're like, ooh, okay, I'm going to be super sweet, or I'm going to create a really special date experience, or I'm going to be really jovial and like fun now, because I know he really loves it when I'm fun, but he doesn't like it when things get serious. So you edit your personality to the parts that he can handle instead of showing up fully. I really, really want to know in the comments, what do you do? Like, have you experienced any of these things? Because I almost feel like as women, we're so programmed into this that even saying things so out loud like this is almost like, I thought that was just normal. Like, honestly, like, I can't tell you how many clients have told me, like, I just thought that was normal. I just thought that's how women are supposed to be in a relationship. And can you, like, it's probably landing so strongly for you. It probably feels so logical for you that if you're not showing up fully as yourself in relationship, in early dating, sorry, how can you expect to have that space later on down the line? And then you notice your relationship's crumbling from 2 months to 3 months. Those early moments in dating are for you to find out who this person is and can he handle all of you. And of course there are emotional skills and emotional regulation where you're showing up as a super best version of yourself that is really showing all of your good traits in a way that really honors who you are as a person. But actually, some of the negative emotions that we feel, they're not bad. They're very valid aspects of yourself. There are some awkward conversations that have to happen in early dating in order to understand, if I invest more emotions in this, is this something that is actually just going to be a no-brainer lasting relationship? Or at the very least, if this connection breaks, is it going to be something that I didn't see? like a red herring or something that I could just not have predicted? Or be honest with me, Queen, did you kind of see it coming? Because I know I used to invest so much into relationships, and I knew by date one, date two, date three, if our relationship breaks up, it's going to be this that breaks it. And hey, presto, guess what happens 3 months down the line? And if you're still dating from a mindset of, well, you've got to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, or it's better to invest in something rather than nothing, you're just closing the door to better things that might come along in the future, because now you can't be emotionally available for that. Okay, that went a bit off tangent, but I just wanted to give you a bigger context of why this behavior of yours, this kindness of yours, screws you over later on. It sets you up to fail. Okay, another one, maybe you soften your opinion so he feels understood first. I know I've done this one too. I know my clients have done this one too, right? Like, you want him to feel like empathy first, right? Isn't that the empathy sandwich? Isn't that non-violent communication? But then when it comes to actually telling him the truth, you soften it so much that it loses its meaning completely. Do you also, here's another one, do you phrase your needs in a way that makes him feel comfortable, even if it waters down what you're actually saying, what you actually feel, right? And that's why the argument just keeps being recurring, because it hasn't really landed for him, because you haven't said it in a way where he's like, oh, okay, this is a non-negotiable. I need to sort this out. But also on a subconscious level, you know he wouldn't be able to do it and he can't handle it. So what's the point, right? Maybe you choose your words very carefully, or you rewrite your text replies a dozen times because you just don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want him to feel ABC, criticized, ganged up on, judged. But actually, where do you sit emotionally in the connection then? Right? So it's kind of going back to this idea of being overregulated. There are empathetic ways to say and do things, but sometimes in early dating, it can be awkward. There can be awkward situations to navigate, and you want to make sure you don't skip those. Because if you do, they're coming back. They're coming back in 3 months, 6 months, a year, and you've already experienced that, right? Do you worry that if you're too direct about what you want, he'll think you're demanding or a diva and then completely lose interest? You don't want to bring up the long-term conversations on date one, date two, date three. Like, what are you looking for? What does long-term partnership look like for you? Do you think you'd ever get married? Do you want children? Like, you don't want to scare him off and come on so strong so soon. And guess what? That conversation just gets harder and harder to have the more and more attached and the more the actual emotional intimacy builds. Okay, here's a huge one. Do you avoid talking about things that stress you? Did you have a really stressful week once and you were in a relationship and you're like, no, relationship and early connection is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be about me talking about my stressful job. And I get it. There is a dial with it, right? Like, if your job is so over consuming and so stressful that you're bringing that energy to every single date, yeah, that's indicating that there's something there that's not in alignment with you in your work life, and that's your responsibility. You're an adult, you're adulting. You need to figure out how to make that job work for you, right? Or change jobs or create a situation in your life that brings you joy. But relationships are supposed to be safe little cocoons for us to be like, you know what, I had a really stressful week today, and I'm so looking forward to seeing you. And I noticed that I was really looking forward to seeing you, and I noticed I'm just really struggling to shake it off. How does he react? Does he try and rescue you? Does he try and sort of be like, okay, well, what can I do to make this feel more like, well, he might be like, I totally get it, but you're not giving him the chance to almost shine his golden heart on the date and show you what he can do, because you're just either over self-regulating that, right? You're over self-regulating yourself and not bringing a real life scenario to the date, right? So that's another one that we sometimes do. So maybe you also soften your feedback so he doesn't feel criticized, right? If you do these things or other things on these lines, and I'm genuinely like, let me know, like, did those resonate, or are there other things that are kind of penny dropping for you? Like, ooh, does this come under that category too? And like, where do I draw the line with that? Ask me the question in the comments, let me know, right? Maybe you over prioritize keeping the peace, right? We talked about this in a past video about Sometimes we do that because we're trying to preserve the connection. We don't want the connection to break. But actually, I'm not saying you should set up loads of obstacle courses and test the relationship and like in almost a toxic way where it's not reflective of what relationship could look like. But I guess on some level, the connection should be stress tested in those first 3 months. Otherwise, you're investing so much without knowing, is this someone who can really stand by my side, right? And you're doing the worst part, and this is, we're coming back to the very beginning. We're talking about why you lose yourself, why you always feel like you lose yourself in a relationship and you feel happiest single. What do all these behaviors do? They drain you, and you maintain connection at the cost of your own energy. I mean, it's a lot, isn't it? Are you still wondering why you lose yourself in connection? In dating, you might even feel like the man, and in relationship, you feel like the only one who's doing the emotional work. Sometimes the type of things I hear women say is, Lena, I did everything. I gave everything to that relationship and it still didn't work, right? All of those overgiving behaviors cost you over time the most precious thing, you. It costs you to be in a relationship. And if you're the type of woman who is still single in your 30s and above, on a deep subconscious level, you are not going to settle. I'm telling you this now, you're not the type of person who is going to settle. The only type of relationship that is ever going to be acceptable to you is a conscious, healthy, emotionally balanced relationship, right? And that's why you cannot accept these relationship dynamics. And that's why being single just feels better, because you can take all your time and energy back to recuperate and revitalize until you feel ready for the next relationship. And it's wasting time. It's wasting time in your dating journey to lifetime partnership or marriage. Because without changing the dating and relationship dynamic from the very beginning, without learning to take up that emotional space and learning to actually feel okay to be you, the same thing is just going to keep happening again and again. So how does this connect back to mistaking overgiving for love? So I just want that to land a little bit. We're mistaking, when we do these overgiving behaviors, we're mistaking overgiving for love, and we're also mistaking things like kindness for love, okay? Because you're overgiving to the connection, but undergiving, let's actually use the right word, starving. You're starving your own emotional reality. You feel something and you starve it, you don't express it. And that is not love. That is a false sense of loyalty to the men you're dating too early on. I'm genuinely curious to hear in the comments if you relate to this, right? Because once you see this pattern, you cannot unsee it, right? And in the third video in this playlist, we're actually going to talk about where this behavior actually comes from. And this dynamic comes from a very specific place. It's specific, but if you're resonating with this video, for your dating journey to find the right partner for you, it's very important. And I'm going to say this in 3 ways because I just really need this to land for you. Your loyalty is to the other, but for some reason, not to yourself. Your overgiving is to maintain a connection that might not be working for you, instead of giving to yourself and dating in a way where your future goal of life partnership is supported. It's an inevitability. Third way, you're trying to save a connection that your nervous system just can't handle to begin with. But here's the thing, if you change your behavior early on in dating, and let's be honest, it's not just about behavior, it's about mindset and it's about skill set too, right? But it doesn't mean that if you change all of these things from the beginning, it doesn't mean the connection will necessarily crumble. Because maybe you're thinking, well, Lena, okay, let's be real for a sec. If I change all of these things, that connection's just going to break and I really like that guy. I've been there. It doesn't mean that, okay? It means the connection will adapt. Yes. When you change the way you behave and you think and you feel and you relate, guess what? The other person in a relationship has to adapt or not. because that version of connection will really give you the real data of whether that relationship will stand the test of time for you and your needs. So it's choosing yourself every single time, even when you're not even sure if it's the right thing to do or if it's the stable thing to do, right? Maybe you don't think it's a stable behavior, or maybe you think it's not emotionally regulated behavior. Doesn't matter. You're going to choose yourself anyway, right? The cost of not choosing yourself and prioritizing your loyalty to yourself and your life, well, it leaves you feeling like you can't take being in relationship anymore because you just don't have any energy left, right? You're emotionally and physically drained. You can't stand to be in it anymore. You can't suppress yourself anymore. You feel like you've given everything to the relationship and you just can't seem to make it work. So guess what? The relationship ends and you've already been there, right? Either because you end it or because he does. Have you ever been there? Because so many of you were raised not to be selfish. And yes, I completely resonate with that in my own journey, right? But what that really involved was putting yourself last. And that doesn't work in long-lasting relationships because putting yourself last leads to that losing yourself drain that we're talking about today. Okay, but let me know in the comments so I can actually better understand what part of this video is resonating with you, right? Where have you been overgiving or over loyal to the man or the men you're dating, or the relationship connection, or in general, even where have you been overgiving to the dating process at the expense of yourself? So if you find yourself doing most of the emotional labor in exchange for being in a relationship, that's self-abandonment. And mistaking overgiving or loyalty for kindness or love is ultimately just self-abandonment under the guise of being a good person. Overgiving and putting yourself last doesn't make you a good person. It's not about being cruel to others. It's about being loyal to yourself. You should always be loyal to yourself first and foremost, because the relationship you want can only form around the real you, not the overgiving version of you. Okay, now that you know your goodness and loyalty to the men you barely know in dating is actually a one-way ticket to complete emotional burnout with zero chance of your dates turning into a relationship, what's your dating strategy to stay loyal to yourself in the dating process so that relationships don't feel like so much work and actually feel good? Watch the next video to find out.